Okay, so picture this. A quiet suburban street just before dawn. Everything looks normal. But behind one of those doors, a mother of three has just vanished. There's no sign of a break-in, no witnesses, really no clues at all. But what no one knew was that something was watching. A single, silent digital witness that was about to blow this whole case wide open.
And that's really at the heart of this story. On a street where everything looked just perfect on the outside, something truly terrible was happening in private. It's just a chilling reminder that sometimes the calmest surfaces can hide the deepest, darkest secrets. So let's go there. We're on Lancaster Boulevard, August 10th, 2025. It's the middle of the night. Everything is still. The only hint of the tragedy about to unfold were these faint, muffled noises. Sounds that you'd barely even notice. But a neighbor did see something. They happened to glance out their window and saw a man, a figure, dragging something heavy in the pitch dark. At the time, they had no idea what they were seeing, but it was the final, tragic act in a long story of control, fear, and a woman's desperate attempt to escape. So pretty soon, the question was just hanging in the air, terrifying her friends and family. What happened to Shayla? Where did she go? And that one single question, well, it would launch this massive international investigation to find the answer. To really get what happened that night, we first have to understand who Shayla Cabrera was. We need to talk about the life she was fighting so hard to build, and the dream that was just so tragically cut short. Shayla came here from Peru with this one huge dream, to give her 3 sons a safe and happy life. Her friends describe her home as being just filled with laughter and love. It was this little sanctuary she built to shield her boys from the struggles that she was facing herself. And this is where you see the two completely different realities of Shayla's life. Publicly, her husband Josimar, he looked like a caring partner, a stable family man. But behind closed doors, Shayla was living an absolute nightmare, a cycle of abuse and threats that had actually followed them all the way from Peru. But by the summer of 2025, something had changed. Shayla had made up her mind that she was not going to live in fear anymore. She started quietly, carefully, making a plan to escape and to finally get her and her sons to safety. And this timeline is just heartbreaking. It shows you just how close she was to getting out. On August 9th, she makes this hopeful phone call to her parents back in Peru, telling them her plan, that she's finally leaving. Less than 24 hours later, she was murdered. And the details that prosecutors allege are just bone-chilling. They argue this wasn't some heated argument that got out of control. They say it was a calculated murder, carried out in silence, while his 3 young sons were asleep, just feet away in the next room. The prosecution also added what's called a special circumstances allegation. Now, it's a legal term, but it's really significant. By alleging a knife was used, they're painting a picture of a crime that wasn't just violent, it was incredibly personal and brutally final. So when Shayla doesn't answer her phone, her friends get worried and they go to the police. The detectives, of course, they start with the obvious person, her husband. But the one man who should have been the most concerned person in the world, he had a story. In fact, he had several of them, and none of them were adding up. First, he told people she'd been detained by immigration. Then, the story changed. She'd left him for somebody else. Finally, he just vaguely said she'd been in some kind of accident, but with 0 details. With every single lie, the red flags just got bigger. This was not a worried husband. This was a man trying to cover his tracks. With Josimar's stories completely falling apart, investigators started canvassing the neighborhood, and they asked one of his neighbors a simple question. Do you have a security camera? They did. And on that little camera was the one piece of evidence that was about to change everything. The footage itself, it's grainy and silent, but what it shows is unmistakable. It's 4 a.m., and you can see Josimar dragging a large, heavy bundle to his car. You can see him struggling to lift it into the trunk. It was cold, undeniable proof that confirmed everyone's worst fears. Based on the direction he drove, the police immediately focused their search on the Angeles National Forest. Now, to put that in perspective, we're talking about a search area of over 700,000 acres, an impossibly huge wilderness, a place often used to make people disappear for good. And just like that, the entire investigation exploded into an international manhunt. I mean, they weren't just searching for Shayla's body in the forest anymore. They were now in a desperate race against time to find Josimar and the 3 children, who he had taken with him on the run. And look at how fast everything started moving then. It's incredible. On August 16th, they find Shayla's body. The very same day, they locate the kids, safe in Peru. By the 21st, the LA District Attorney files formal charges. And just 6 days after that, with nowhere else to run, Josimar surrenders. It was a stunning example of international cooperation. Yeah, the moment Shayla's body was found, the clock started ticking. Interpol issued an international warrant, and suddenly every border became a trap. The world was closing in on him, and in just a few short days, he had absolutely nowhere left to hide. But there was this incredibly frustrating delay. Before the official U.S. murder charges were filed, Josimar was actually detained and then released twice, once in Mexico and once in Peru. Because of international red tape, until all the paperwork was perfectly in order, a known murder suspect had to be let go. It was just an agonizing race against the clock for law enforcement. So today, he is awaiting extradition back to California to stand trial. If he's convicted, he faces 26 years to life in prison. Now, of course, no sentence can ever bring Shayla back, but it's a step toward getting some measure of justice for her. At a vigil held in her honor, her community came together with this really simple but powerful message: justice for Shayla and not one more. Her personal tragedy had become a public rallying cry, a way to make sure her fight for freedom didn't just end with her death. You know, in the end, it all comes back to that one digital witness. Without that camera, Josimar might very well have gotten away with it. Shayla's story could have just remained a mystery. And that leaves us with one final haunting question. For every one story like this that is captured on camera, how many more remain untold?